Welcome to Bulletproof Veteran Podcast. Thank you for your service.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to Bulletproof Veteran Podcast. I have a great one for you this week. We have on the show a retired colonel from the U.S. Army. We have Colonel Steve Miska, okay? He's a Long Island guy, so you know I'm excited to talk to him because anytime I can talk to a veteran from Long Island, I get happy because we know so many of the same people. The veteran community on Long Island, especially Suffolk County, even though it's one of the biggest in the state, it's a very tight-knit group. You run into people all the time, and you know the same places, you know the same people. So it's great to talk to you, Steve. Sir, thank you for coming on the show.
Jason, thanks. And I'm happy to be here. I wish you would drop the colonel. I tried to get my publisher to drop that off the book, and I lost that argument. But, you know, I just feel like we all have a position to play on a team, and I don't care about rank. I don't know what rank you were when you served. So I'm just, you know, excited equally to meet a fellow Long Islander, especially learning that you worked in a marina. I grew up on boats on Long Island, and just I've got salt water in my blood. That's why my wife and I live near the water now.
Yeah. Where do you guys live now?
We live in San Clemente, so right north of Camp Pendleton, so a big marine town, but we represent the Army well out here.
I was going to say, how's that work out running into people in the bars and stuff like that? You do all right?
You know what? Marines are brothers, just like, you know, fellow service members and women. And we bonded in combat, and we bond back here in CONUS as well.
I'll tell you what, I've had a bunch of Marines on the show. I've had a blast talking to each one of them. I always say, as an Air Force guy, I love talking to my Marines because, one, they make fun of me right away, which I love. I'm into that. I get to say that they eat crayons and all that kind of stuff, and they get to basically say that I did nothing for a 5-year enlistment. But it's fun, and I have a blast talking to my Marines, so I'm sure you have a good time up there as well.
Oh yeah, and feel free, you know, have at it. I'm just a knuckle dragging infantry guy, so you know, there's plenty to go around there.
That's all right. My father was a tank mechanic in the Army, and he was trained to be recon. They reclassed him before he was supposed to go to Vietnam, and he wasn't a U.S. citizen yet. So his paperwork got screwed up. They never sent him to Vietnam. He was going to go to Vietnam as a recon MOS, and he never went, thank God, because recon did not do very well over there. And they ended up sending him to Germany to work on tanks instead.
Oh, so, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of a very like weird thing that happened to him. But like for me, it's a very good thing because I don't know what would have happened if he would have ended up over there.
So my dad went to Vietnam, but he was an engineer, and he ended up basically floating on boats, bringing in heavy engineer equipment. So he really didn't spend a lot of time in the country per se, but did a couple years in Vietnam. And he was really the early influence on me to go to West Point. He talked to me when I was 16, and he said, you know, you should think about this. And I said, what's West Point? I'd never even heard of it. You know, I was just a punk on the streets of Greenport at that time. And that kind of kicked off my military career.
Well, and West Point for people that don't live, say, in New York, when we were growing up, West Point was where the sports camps were. You knew about it in school. Every school had a kid that went to West Point for the most part. You know, you grew up watching Army Navy games and all that kind of stuff. My brother went to a lacrosse camp at West Point, so we would go up there for him when he would play lacrosse and all of that. So like West Point was kind of this thing that like hovered in the background that you knew about, but you didn't know why you knew about it always. That you didn't really, it wasn't necessarily attributed to the military, but with your father, he probably right away was like, hey, this is the military academy. This is what it has to offer.
Yeah. Well, so, you know, I went to a smaller school than you did. So we didn't have a guy who went to West Point. I literally had never heard of it. Okay. And my dad mentioned it. And he just said, you know, when I was in Vietnam, the West Point officers were a cut above, and you should think about that. And, you know, I was already an athlete and I had good grades. I didn't have any leadership. And that's where I realized, you know, if I'm serious about this, then I need to try to get some leadership positions and, you know, develop myself there. So, and I was fortunate enough to, you know, get nominated to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you did the whole, you get a congressperson and all that kind of stuff, and you go through that whole application. Now, what was your experience like at West Point? I mean, I would imagine it had to be difficult. But when you were all done, that had to be just an amazing accomplishment to finish that.
Well, so I actually had two experiences at West Point. One as a cadet, where I wasn't the greatest student, and then I got a redo, man. So some of my mentors out in the field, I was in the airborne infantry, jumping out of perfectly good airplanes that you guys flew, and my mentors said, you should consider going back there to teach. And I thought, wow, I wasn't a good student. I didn't have the discipline for West Point, quite frankly. When I went, I'd never had a curfew in my life. So I went into this very structured environment from pretty much doing my own thing as a teenager, working a job to, support my habit of running around with my buds. And so when I went back, it was just incredible. It was, and even as a cadet, I was too immature to appreciate the opportunities that were being provided there. But my friends that I've had from there for life we're still in contact. It's just, our alma mater, we go back to, it's a beautiful campus.
Yeah.
And my kids were young when they grew up there. We were there for 2 years, and great place to raise a family.
Yeah, it's an awesome experience, and you were able to give back to that next generation of cadet and Army officer. I talk about it on the show quite often, my education background, and I said the same thing that you actually just said. I should not have gone to college right out of
exactly.
School. I was not mature enough. Now, you went into something that was very structured, and I went to Western New England College in Springfield, Massachusetts. There was a strip club down the road. There was an ATM where I could get kegs of beer, and I lost my scholarship after the first year. And my parents weren't going to pay for it. So I ended up coming home, and that's how I ended up enlisting in the Air Force.
Yeah.
But could I do it again? I would have done what I did the second time around, which was I waited till later in life. And then I went all the way through to my master's because I was actually an adult at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't a stupid kid that just wanted to party and drink and have a good time with his friends. But listen, I have a couple of good memories and a couple of good stories that I wouldn't trade for anything.
No. And it on reflection, it was such an amazing experience, but I just didn't get it. And I was really lucky I didn't get kicked out freshman year, quite frankly, because I was pretty a nonconformist in a very structured environment. Let's just put it at that.
Yeah, that's got to be an interesting situation, definitely.
Yeah.
So you graduated West Point, you head out into, now you were not reserve, you went active duty right out?
Yep. Active duty infantry. And, I didn't know much about the Army, quite frankly. West Point gives you a good exposure to it. And my dad really didn't talk about it when I was growing up. So I didn't know what the Army was really like. So I decided, though, if I was going to do this thing, I was going infantry, and I wanted to be, airborne ranger and all that sort of stuff. And so anyway, I went to Ranger School, graduated, and I was heading to Panama on my first assignment. And at the time, I thought, here I am, 22 years old. I'm going. Panama at that time was a hardship tour because it was right after Just Cause, where I had actually gone down beforehand as a cadet on the troop leader training, and led a platoon on some operational missions. And so I really wanted to go back and see it. But I ran into this girl from Long Island and got struck by lightning or something.
Yeah.
Because at the time I thought there's no way I can manage being married and being an infantry leader at the same time. But I took her with me and we got married down there, and she's been with me ever since, going on 30 years now come December.
It's those Long Island girls, man. There's something about those Long Island girls. They get you.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's a Nassau girl. I know you said that your wife is from Suffolk County, like I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, she wrangled me up real quick. I couldn't, but it's a good thing. She keeps me on the straight and narrow,
Absolutely.
which is what I need.
It's good for both of us.
Yes, yeah, I definitely think so. So you went down to Panama. Now you're married. The whole deal.
Yeah. Back to Bragg. So airborne infantry in Panama. Mm-hmm. Then I went to the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg, commanded a company. Did really well. We had our first child there, my son Rob, and then ended up, thinking I wasn't the best student. I'm getting this opportunity to go teach, and I got accepted to go teach at West Point, and so went to grad school, West Point, and then back out to the field. And at that time, 9/11 had just hit.
Okay.
I got assigned to a mechanized infantry unit over in Germany, and we immediately started training to deploy to Iraq, figuring it was right around the corner.
It was going to happen.
Exactly. And so I got stuck in the Iraq do loop out of Germany. I did 3 combat tours from there. My kids grew up in Bavaria, which was unbelievable. It was an incredible experience. And then I was in Baghdad on my second tour, and that's when all my interpreters started getting killed. Mm-hmm. And anybody that was affiliated with Americans were being targeted. It was 2006 and 2007, the height of sectarian cleansing.
Yeah, it was getting real bad around that time.
Yeah, it was lethal for us, right? But it was really bad for them because their families were in the mix.
Of course.
At least our families were safe somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we set up this Underground Railroad and started helping them navigate not just the dangers of the street to get out of there, but also the bureaucracy, which we couldn't even figure out. So I figured, if we can't figure out our own bureaucracy, no Iraqi's going to.
There's no way.
Yeah. And so, and one of the interesting things that I detail in the book is there was a built-in catch-22. It was that the Embassy Baghdad had decided that it was too dangerous to interview Iraqis. And that was the last step in the process for a special immigrant visa. So they said, you need to go to Embassy Amman in Jordan. Mm-hmm. Well, the Jordanians had closed the border to Iraqis because they had a refugee crisis on their hands. So the Iraqis had to come up with an alibi just to get across the border to the U.S. Embassy in the hope that they would have to sell everything, leave their friends and family behind, go to Amman, and hopefully they would be accepted. And if they were, the last stop on the Underground Railroad was the U.S.
The U.S.
And I would tell these guys were, 20, 21, 25 at the most years old. And their vision of what it was going to be like when they got to America was, straight out of Hollywood. And so I'd tell them, nobody's going to meet you at JFK Airport and have a welcoming party, man. No. Nobody cares when you get there. And you have no idea how hard it's going to be to make a living. Pamela Anderson's not going to be your girlfriend.
Yep.
And it's going to be hard. And so we set up a network of sponsors in the U.S. All these courageous women basically opened their doors and welcomed these young Arab males into their homes and helped them assimilate and get their feet on the ground.
And one of the things you touch on in the book, and actually a couple articles that I've read about some of the work that you did along the way, is the importance that these interpreters played for the units they were part of. So for anybody who hasn't deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, and for any civilian listening to the show that maybe doesn't understand, we say interpreter, okay?
Yeah.
But really what these men were doing was providing security for these units because they were giving vital intel and they were alerting these units of just danger around the corner, basically. Can you talk a little bit about the importance that they play, the important role?
Yeah, I mean, so in the service, a lot of times we've got shorthand where we'll call them terps.
Okay.
And I basically flat out said, I don't like that term at all. I think it's derogatory. These guys are cultural advisors. They are keeping us alive, exactly as you said. There are cultural eyes, ears, and mouthpieces to understand the human terrain, right? To really understand the population that we're dealing with and hopefully mitigate any harm we might do. And many of them saved our lives. I mean, they would tell us, hey, I just heard from one of my buddies in the Iraqi security forces that there's an IED up ahead. Right now in Afghanistan, the Taliban, they refer to the interpreters as the eyes, and they will intentionally target them first. They're like, shoot the eyes first. And it's just, it's super dangerous for anybody that walks alongside, not just Americans, Western forces, right? This applies to the German soldiers, British, and the others that are in Afghanistan now as well. They are high value targets for our adversaries. And we owe them. They stood by us. Like the guys that went on patrol with me, I gave them weapons. I let them go to the range, qualify. If they were good, because everybody needed to defend themselves. It was so lethal in the fight.
Yeah. Especially that time that you're talking about. I mean, that was, and the sectarian violence was so bad at that time. And when you talk about the dangers, that it wasn't just when they were out with you guys that they were in danger. Their families were in danger. They were in danger. They couldn't just go home and say, my day's over.
Yeah.
They were constantly looking behind them.
Yeah. They had to live with us full time on the base. Now, the danger was, because they're a cash-based society, they had to go home usually once a month. And that was super risky. And it was like being in a James Bond movie. How they did this, they'd take 2 taxis, and you take one taxi, get out, go through a building, walk to the other side, jump in another taxi, go link up at a rendezvous point with their brother or somebody. They would not go to their family's home. They'd meet at a third location somewhere, so it was super risky, like you said. And to put it in perspective for, your civilian listeners out there, at that time, looking at the casualty estimates for civilians in Iraq, there were 3,000 casualties a month. So that's a 9/11 every month for that year leading up to when we really started pushing guys out on the Underground Railroad. And these guys were just, and you know what? 6 of them. So I got about 3 dozen of them out. 6 of them, when they got here, enlisted in either the U.S. Army or Marines, and some of them deployed back to combat as combat linguists, American service members now.
See, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
And, I was reading, it's a pretty dated article, but it was around the time that you were talking about, 2007. And I think it was like 59 interpreters eligible to come to the United States. And I think at that time, only 2 of them were approved. So this isn't a process, like you said, there's so much bureaucracy around this. This isn't a process where you just took them down somewhere. Even if you did get them into Jordan to get that leg of it, they were still getting denied. It wasn't like, hey, once I get them to Jordan, they're good to go, and then the Americans are going to take them. We kind of had a very shut door policy to many of these interpreters. I mean, still, you're only talking about yourself. You were able to get, you said, about 3 dozen.
Yep.
It's not a lot. You know what I mean? It's great, and that's amazing what you've done. But when you think about the amount that were out there and helping, it's a drop in the bucket that we need to do. And especially
exactly.
And especially with what's going on in Afghanistan now, I laugh and I cry, I guess is the best way to say it. I look at our government saying, okay, we're going to pull out. We're going to leave.
Yeah.
Which is good. Good. Okay, great. Get our guys home. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But there are so many assets and individuals and things that need to be taken care of in a way that we're not leaving this to become just a bunch of people that end up hating America again, because that's what you're going to do. These families are destroyed if you let these people just fend for themselves. And I know that that's something that's on the horizon.
And don't forget the Afghan National Security Forces as well. I mean, I saw where General Miller, the commanding general, is worried about the possibility that they're going to feel that we're betraying them by just leaving them high and dry, and that there could be conflict there between our forces and the Afghan forces. So it's a super challenging problem. I can tell you, when we withdrew from Iraq, it was cathartic for me as somebody who spent 40 months there, feeling like, did we do enough? And at some point, the Iraqis needed to take ownership for it and, really walk on their own. But not leaving, we had military there supporting the diplomatic mission and the defense contracts that we have with the country. And I'm sure there will be that sort of robust presence on the diplomatic side in Afghanistan. But if things unravel from a national security perspective there, our entire diplomatic presence could be at risk. And so we've really got to keep an eye on it.
And we don't want foreign entities going in there and filling that. And I'm gonna hate myself after I use this term, because I used to hate it when politicians did this. But if somebody else comes in and fills the void that we leave behind, it's kind of a cliche kind of terminology, but there is a truth. Listen, Afghanistan is one of the highest concentrations of lithium in the world, I believe. Think about what lithium is used for. It is the new oil. It is what we will fight wars over in Venezuela and things like that down the road one day. Chile is another one. Russia and China are not going to just let that lithium go bye-bye. They have a stake in all of this. And there is a danger that if we do not set up this country for success, that it's going to go down a bad, bad road. And it already kind of has. I mean, let's be honest. We've been there for, it's 20 years of doing this, and it's still not sorted out. It's just a very dangerous situation. It's very dangerous for these individuals that did put their lives and families on the line to help us. And we don't want to leave them hanging.
And so right now, with those individuals in question, we're talking about 17,000 plus in the backlog for special immigrant visas.
Wow.
And they represent 70,000 family members. So that is, substantial. But what I would say is it's not unprecedented. We have done this before, right? And a lot of the nonprofit community, veteran organizations in this space are advocating for what we call the Guam option, which means relocate them to a safe place, right? So there's literally what the administration needs to do is like a 4-step process. Have clear identification for who these people are, relocate them to Guam is really just it doesn't need to be Guam. It could be any third territory or country where they're relatively safe, and we can then continue a rigorous vetting process. That's the third step. That is already in place, where these are the most vetted refugees anywhere in the world.
Right.
They've got background checks on them, just like any of us do who have served. So we know them well. But then the fourth step is the most important one. And it is, we need to have a whole of society approach to this, which means the American people need to be asked to step up and support. This is a veteran issue right now. There are so many veterans that care about their Afghan buddy that they feel like they left behind. And that makes them feel like they violated an ethos that we instill in them in the military. And it makes them ashamed of our country for not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
So, and what the American people can do is they can be the sponsors. They can get their church groups together and welcome an Afghan family after they get vetted from Guam or some other third place. And I go in about the last third of the book is these types of stories.
Right.
The Madonna from Tucson, who opens her she's a widow with her only son in combat in Baghdad. And her son called her up and said, "Mom, I need help. Ronnie's got a special immigrant visa to come to the US, and I'd like you to sponsor him." And so Madonna says, yes, of course. Her son's asking. And she goes to work, and all her girlfriends think she's lost her mind and she's crazy. How are you going to let some strange Arab male come live with you, a single woman? And she said, when she picked Ronnie up at the airport, she immediately knew he was going to be like a second son to her. And of course, he did what all sons do to their moms, Jason. He broke her heart. He enlisted in the Army and deployed back to combat. So both their sons were in combat.
Yeah.
But those are the types of, the American people have it within them, right? They just haven't been asked to step up and be a part of these conflicts. And I think that's probably what the current administration is worried about, is what do we do if we do relocate these 70,000? And I think we've got it in us to do the right thing.
We've proved it time and time again. You look at American citizens as a whole throughout, when compared to the rest of the world, give more to charity, do more for charity, and just do more for the general good than anybody in the world. And I will say that till the day I die. You can make arguments of government and politics and all this, but the average citizen always steps up when they're needed. We have time and time and time again.
Super generous.
Super generous. We give and we give. I mean, I do these races and raise money for all these. I never have a problem hitting my goals for the most part because, $35 to run a race. Yeah, sure. I'll give you $35. No problem. $100 donation. Yeah, sure. I'll do that. No big deal. Because we want to help. We want to help these people. And like you said, you talk about it in the book. You're talking about widows, mothers that have kids overseas. They're opening their doors. Communities can open their doors as well. There's plenty of community organizations that can sponsor somebody to come over. You wouldn't have to go through all of this if you look back to perfect example is World War II. We had no problem welcoming in Nazi scientists to work on our space program. We brought them into this country one after another. We wanted to get them before the Russians could get them because the Russians were doing the same thing. They wanted to work on rocket technology, get them over here. It was not even a question. They didn't have to fill out any special paperwork or anything like that because they had this thing that we wanted. The government wanted that.
Yep.
That's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is because it's the right thing to do. And we have 17,000 people out there that need us with 70,000 family members that are counting on us to do the right thing and whole communities that will remember how we act in this situation. And that's why we have to do this and we have to win.
And you're absolutely right. But what I would point out, and I make this point a lot when I have to go to the Hill and advocate for SIV legislation, is, this is morally the right thing to do. Absolutely. Which is why all the vets are lining up behind it. But it's in our real national security interest to do this, man.
Yes.
It's our men and women in other conflict zones are with interpreters now, and we're undermining their relationship with those interpreters and other people that support them by not standing by these guys. It undermines our relationships with host nation military and security forces. It undermines our counterterrorism investigations around the world. There are real consequences, not to mention, is that how we want our young men and women to leave their time in service, feeling like they violated their own ethos and ashamed of their country? I don't think so. That's a real national security, consequence, because they're not going to go home to their high school and say, you should sign up for the military. They're going to, be dealing with issues that are contributing to PTSD and everything. And then on the sponsor side, every one of those sponsors that I talk about in the book, all of them say, I would do it over again. It was hard. It was a challenge. The cultural, mixing and all that was difficult, but I would do it again. It was one of the most meaningful things I did in my life.
Yeah. How did they talk at all about how it was for them with stereotypes, having an Arabic person come in? You hear it all the time. I mean, you see it here in New York. People, they see an Arabic person and there's a stereotype that this is, I got to watch that guy over there. I got to watch him because he's going to do something. Did anybody talk about that in the book with having to deal with that?
Madonna talked a little bit about it. My mom was a sponsor, actually. She dealt with it a little bit. I was, so the interpreters all got out and everybody, we had sponsors for them. But another part of the story is I helped this Iraqi general and his entire family. His family was in hiding the whole time he was in command. They were being targeted. They couldn't go to school. They couldn't do anything.
Was that the general that he got called into that private meeting and a bunch of the Iraqi forces put guns to his head?
Yeah.
That was okay. All right.
Yeah. It was actually Jaish al-Mahdi militia.
Okay. That's right.
We're threatening them. Yeah. And so anyway, he's there and I told him, look, I'll try to get your family out. I don't know how, because we can't use this visa, that they don't qualify for that.
Right.
And so we literally ran it up to General Petraeus, to Ambassador Crocker. There was really no legal way we could do this. And so I talked to a CNN journalist, and we ended up getting the family out to Turkey, where they then applied through the UNHCR process for refugee status.
Okay.
But that was a difficult, and so I was going back to Germany, right? And the Germans at the time had revoked all the provisional visas for Iraqis. It was like not a good climate, and plus they weren't going to let some American bring an Iraqi family into their country.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a bit of a bind, so here at 39 years old, infantry lieutenant colonel, and I did what all soldiers do. I called my mom and I said, "Hey mom, I need help.
I need some help."
And she said yes. And unfortunately, I feel bad for my stepdad, because he was an unconsulted partner in all that. She just agreed without,
oh man.
But she swears I didn't tell her how many kids were involved, because the general had 5 kids.
Oh, wow.
And a month before we got the family out, it gets really crazy here. He decided to marry a second wife. And I said, no, you can't do this, man.
What are you doing to me, man?
Yeah, I said, you're putting your whole family at risk. It's illegal in the US. Do not do this. And he, it looks good in the eyes of Allah. And this woman, I need to take care of her. She's, unmarried and all this sort of stuff. And so anyway, I don't know how they did it, but the general, his 2 wives, and all 5 kids moved in with my mom in Maryland for about 2 months. They all lived together.
Wow. You could that could be an HBO series right there.
It's a soap opera, man.
I mean, you could just do it right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's it was, and I didn't know all the stuff that happened, right? Because I went back to Germany and was getting ready to deploy back to Iraq.
Uh-huh.
And so when people kept asking me, will you please write this book? It's a story that needs to be told, and I was resisting it. And then so I finally decided, okay, I'll write the book, but I want to hear the perspectives of everybody that was involved. And I just remember when I interviewed my mom and my stepdad, I was thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what I asked you guys to do. And the stories they told were just incredible. So 2 chapters in the book kind of work through that story.
Yeah, that's I could only imagine. But you know what? I could see making that phone call, because it's like you said, I'm gonna call my mom.
Yeah.
Who else would you call? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you call your mom, and your mom, like many others, was like, all right, yeah, I guess we're going to do this.
You're my son. I'm going to do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
it's pretty funny. The general, when he showed up, he refers to my mom as Madame Betty.
Okay.
And so Madame Betty and Mr. George, that was the sort of running joke in the family for a while.
That's pretty crazy. And if you actually read a little bit about what that general was going through, you see why you had to get him out. I mean,
yeah, it was, and he kept asking me, for advice on what he should do. And I told him, I can't tell you, man, you need to make the call. If you stay, you're probably going to be killed.
Right.
If you don't go, or if you go, you're going to regret it, because you didn't stay. So it was a really difficult choice, but he ended up going back at the end of the day.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, I know the one story about when they were pointing the guns at it, said the only reason they didn't kill him then was because they didn't want to involve the U.S. military in an investigation and all of that. He would have been dead right probably then and there.
It's such a touchy issue, right? Because they were right by the Kadamiya Shrine, which is this really religiously significant location for Shia Muslims. And so I think that was really what saved him at the end. And
might have played,
the soldiers who just, they wouldn't back down. They just threw him in the Humvee and drove away.
Oh man, that's a crazy story. It really is. And the book, I want to mention the title of it just to make sure everybody knows. It's Baghdad Underground Railroad. I think for the 2 chapters of just that story with your mom, people should be buying this book just to read that, just those 2 chapters, let alone all the other stuff that's in it.
Yeah, there's 2/3 of the book in Iraq and Amman, Jordan. That's all the sexy war stuff.
Yes.
But then then the comedy starts in the US, man, because it is pretty funny.
I'm sure. I mean, I could just imagine the cultural differences, and trying to navigate bathroom habits and prayer time and meal time and all of these different things, that now you have this person that doesn't understand anything about your culture, and you really don't understand anything about their culture, trying to live. It is the example of the odd couple, basically.
Well, it's even worse than that, Jason, because my mom enlisted her husband, my stepdad, in this whole deal, right? And he was the unconsulted partner. But then when they went to pick up the family, they were supposed to be flying into Baltimore. Nobody showed up at the airport, and they were wondering what the heck happened. And it's all this confusing stuff in the nonprofit community and the refugee space. And so they couldn't get an answer. Well, my mom ends up going on this mission trip with her church to Ireland, because she was helping the youth on this mission trip. Mm-hmm. And so she's gone for like 10 days. Well, sure enough, the family shows up in the middle of the night, and my stepdad is home all alone and gets a call. Hey, the family's landed in Baltimore, and we'll get him there, but you just need to pay the van driver $500 cash when he shows up. And he's like, what? And that was the start.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Poor guy. Poor Mr. George, man. That was the start of a really long week for Mr. George.
I'm sure. And there might have been one or two conversations when your mom got home. It's possible.
Well, it's funny because my mom, she, at one point, I detail this in the book. She goes, oh my God, I just looked at George and I knew he was going to leave me unless I got this family out of our house and got them on their feet. And so,
So now, speaking of getting, these families on their feet, you were talking a little bit about a little bit of a network to get them assimilated with the sponsor, teach them a little bit about America. Now, do you guys do anything as far as job creation, that type of stuff?
Yeah, so it depends on the nonprofit or the sponsor organization. Like, I know churches will adopt, an Afghan family, and so different members of the congregation will take on roles. Help resume writing, and then with the classes you need to take for getting your driver's license or whatever it happens to be to help them get their feet on the ground. Some nonprofits have all those capabilities in certain chapters around the country.
Okay.
You've got Mary's List in LA. I know No One Left Behind down in San Diego was doing it with both on the job and hiring side, as well as providing just basic sustenance for living because there is no there's public assistance, but it's really limited. And it's quite frankly, not enough. And
it's not like you can go on welfare or something like that because you're a special visa recipient. You're not
exactly. Yeah,
you're not a
U.S.
U.S. citizen
for any of that,
right?
And they come with one suitcase, and maybe a backpack. They're leaving everything behind.
Yeah.
So it's really hard.
And you're coming with kids and stuff. So now you have kids that are in the mix that are now starting school, possibly, whatever the case may be. There is a lot that goes into just that portion of it, let alone setting an adult up for success. You're trying to set these kids up for success as well.
Yeah.
Which is hard enough.
School, my mom, she talked to me about the 5 kids. They went to 3 different schools: elementary, middle, and high school. And so she had to get them all inoculated, get them to the dentist. So they, all that sort of stuff. And think about it, 5 kids at once, trying to do all that. So that was some of the crazy adventures. But yeah, there's other groups out there. Veterans for American Ideals they have a great veteran network across the country, and many of them step up and sponsor or are involved with nonprofits that do that locally. So a lot of good groups working in this space.
And now, how are things looking for the future? Because we talked a little bit about what's going to happen in Afghanistan. How are we doing with those interpreters that are actually working now in Afghanistan?
So for the future, you mean
legislation-wise? Are we pushing anything forward that is going to take care of these people better than we have, say, in the past? Is it going to just keep being a fight?
Yeah, no, there's an effort underway, and it seems to be getting pretty good. So the special immigrant visa in particular has really strong bipartisan support. It's unusual, right, for an issue on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
And there is an effort afoot in the nonprofit community, the veteran space, and with members of Congress to enact really a permanent SIV, because it's only been enacted for Iraq, and the Iraqi one twilighted in 2014.
Okay.
So it's not even active any longer. And then the Afghan SIV. And so the movement is to try to incorporate anytime we go to a conflict zone to have this policy option available.
Okay.
And that's a good first step. It should be a policy of last resort. We should have other tools to protect identity in advance and insulate what I call our soft networks, the people we're working with in conflict zones, not just military, right? Our diplomats, our other government agencies that are out there doing great work. They need these people.
You founded actually an organization that teaches exactly that, correct? These soft networks, leadership, counterterrorism leadership, all that kind of stuff. So the project for strategically protecting soft networks it's been a project that my consulting practice basically started. And so we founded it. And we got a grant from the Smith Richardson Foundation, really grateful for that. And we partnered with the Pacific Council on International Policy here in LA, and had a lot of researchers from across the country come together to really think about the problem, and then develop a policy development process that we could tee up for the government to enact when the time was right. And so I'm hopeful that we'll have an opportunity when the National Security Council can catch its breath and really drive this in a thoughtful, deliberate way that'll help our departments and agencies really implement the policies and give the guys out in the field, the tools they need to safeguard their most important partners. Yeah. And you said something that's so important, and people need to understand that when you try to do these different things, these legislative actions, you have to have it teed up and ready for our elected officials. The least amount of work that they need to do, the better chance you have of success.
Exactly.
There's so much going on.
Yep.
They are not going to sit with you and come up with the idea. You have to have it written, ready to go. Here's the legislation. You just need to sponsor it and get it into committee and then move it on to the floor. Yep. We see it so often with toxic exposure and stuff like that. There's so many great ideas on things that need to happen for toxic exposure, but the bills that make it through are teed up for these congresswomen, senators, all of that, so that they can just attach their name to it and get it into committee and get it going.
Yeah, they don't have time to think,
No.
And same with the folks who are in the executive branch. I mean, they're being inundated with so many different issues. And that's why, academia, the think tank community, they can do all the creative thinking and tee those ideas up for the policymakers to pick and choose and then figure out what works for them.
And then just head on in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you also have another organization that deals more with First Amendment rights, which is something I'm very pro, but, please talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. First Amendment Voice is really a very new nonprofit. We're only 2 years old.
Okay.
I got into it because I was doing a consulting project on radicalization, which is very much in my wheelhouse, having, been a counterterrorism fellow and spent time abroad chasing some of these guys. And so I did this study and basically looked at, why would a 15-year-old want to get on an airplane, fly to Turkey, and then cross the border into Syria and join ISIS? How can we wrap our mind around that as Americans? And so they really liked it. They said, "Wow, this is good stuff." And they said, "But we'd like you to help us with this First Amendment project we're doing." And I said, "You got the wrong guy. I mean, I don't know anything about the First Amendment. I don't know anything about domestic politics. I'm a foreign policy guy." And they said, no, we just need leadership. And I started digging into it. And of course, I went home to my wife, and my boss said, "You help him out, Steve. You don't get to retire on the beach here in San Clemente and just scuba dive all the time. You need to have a real job." So the more I dug into it, I mean, the more fascinating space it is. As there are 5 fundamental freedoms woven into the First Amendment, all in 45 words. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and petition. And sometimes those freedoms can be in conflict with each other, depending on who you are and which one's more, resonating with you. And so it's super complex space that we've been exploring, how technology is shaping how we express ourselves, how we practice our religion, how it's impacting the way we consume our information.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that say about polarization and why we're so divided? And so all that stuff is just super fascinating space. And we crank out a good bit of video content. We'll post on our YouTube page and just on our programmings, whether it's media bias or our national symposium in September every year around Constitution Day. We've got a big event Friday this week, the Lowry Memorial Award for Citizenship. Our motto is citizenship is not a spectator sport.
That is 100% correct.
Ed Lowry was just this model guy who had strong convictions, but it didn't stop him from working from people whom he disagreed with.
Mm-hmm.
And he figured out ways to serve others in his community. He was a huge loss for us. Was just a strategic thinker and
mm-hmm.
a wonderful champion of the First Amendment. And so anyway, we established a memorial award in his honor, and we'll celebrate Friday evening with his family. His widow and his children will be there.
Wow.
All the nominees who were nominated for the inaugural award will be present, as well as the folks who nominated them. And it's just a good way to celebrate, and as difficult a time period as we are coming out of, we're spotlighting all these good news stories of all this good work that's been happening around the country. And hopefully we're inspiring the audience to want to be more like Ed Lowry and the nominees who were submitted. So it's just a cool way to keep serving, out of uniform.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like I said, the First Amendment and especially freedom of speech, to me, is just, it's what we're all about. And if we don't work at it, like you said, if you take a spectator role, that's when these rights are slowly taken away. And I'm not even saying there's some entity that's trying to take it away. Nature takes it away from you. Being a human, wanting to silence somebody with a different viewpoint, these things are kind of almost wired into us, and you have to fight that to allow yourself to understand that that person's right to say something is the same right that I want to have to say what I want to say. And that we can't just live in some kind of echo chamber, because it does nobody any good. You have to have all those voices, and you have to sit down and have a conversation. It is so important. And it's great to hear that you're championing that, and that you're doing that work, because now more than ever with technology and social media and, even just the way we look at elections and things like that, you see all of this stuff playing in, and it's important that we don't lose sight of what value we have with these basic rights that we have been given. So
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been just a tremendous honor to keep serving in that capacity. And, you mentioned social media and technology. It's enabling us to curate our information in ways where we don't need to hear opposing viewpoints, right? And that's normal. It's natural for us as human beings to want to go to that space. And so anyway, we've got one of our programs is called Digital Detox. And
nice.
It's a way to, get back to nature, get back to ourselves, and maybe seek to understand why somebody might have a different opinion.
Very cool. Very cool. I like that. Tell us a little bit of where we can find the book, all of that kind of stuff, because I really think, one, like I said, if you don't get this book just for the 2 chapters about your mom, I've lost faith in humanity. But it's a great look at the reasons why we need to be doing these things and taking care of these interpreters. And like you said, that soft network and the people that have helped our men and women in uniform, why they've been overseas and protected them. So the rest of the book, the other chapters in the book, get into all of that. So where can they find it?
So it's on Amazon, hardcover, softcover, e-version. We'll have an audio version out later on this summer.
Oh, very cool.
I successfully told my publisher I was not going to be the one doing it.
You're not going to read it, huh?
I'm just not an actor, Jason. My daughter is an actress, and I know how hard that is. I have an appreciation.
It's not easy.
For it.
It's not.
Yeah, no, it's super hard. And I never really understood that until she got in front of cameras. And then I was like, wow, this is super hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the audio version will be out later this summer.
Very cool.
And I'll be speaking around the country, actually. A lot of virtual events will be up on our website, but also we will, I'll be in DC at the end of the month. Early June, and Philly for Flag Day on June 14th.
Cool. Yeah.
I'll be in probably LA, I'm sure, and San Diego a bit. But as we get the events, we'll keep updating the website and letting people know where to find us.
Very cool. Very cool. So like you said, go to Amazon. You can get it all there, like everything else. So you already have your Amazon account, so you can easily just click buy now and get the book. However,
I know you've got listeners out there who are passionate about their local bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
The bookstore, you can put an order in through your local bookstore, and that's another way to get it. And I get that, and I'm all about supporting local businesses as well. So. Absolutely encourage folks to do that too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's not that many local bookshops around. So if you frequent one of those, definitely do it that way, because I know they could use the money right now. And then you're helping out even more. But Steve, I want to talk to you for another hour, but we're both busy men. Come on. And I'm sure the wives will be yelling and screaming here shortly. You know what I mean? Well,
hey, there's a chance I'll be in New York next month. If that happens, when I do the Philly trip, I might try to get up to New York. I'd love to connect in person, man. I feel like you're a brother I haven't known.
Yeah, man. I know. I would love that. Gotta get down to the water. We'll do some fishing.
Sounds great.
Do you have anything last minute stuff to add? Anything you want to say to the listeners?
The only thing I'd say is, I wrote the book because of issues like Afghanistan. And so, if you want to buy the book and go read the book, that's great. But we as an American public need to get behind this issue and really support those 17,000 interpreters and the 70,000 families they represent, because that is the way we will withdraw from Afghanistan with dignity, is if we all stand behind and get behind whatever policy option the administration, puts forth.
Yeah, very cool. And, get in contact with you. If people want to get involved, if they want to try to do something, they can get in contact through the website, that type of thing, and they can get involved. So we have it's a big army out there of veterans that want to help. So please, if this is something that sparks with you, if you served with an interpreter and all of a sudden you're like, wow, listening to this interview, I really want to get involved, please get over to the website. And, I'm sure there's a nonprofit that would love to have the volunteers to help with all the groundwork that goes into all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find me there. Reach out.
Very cool. Well, it's been a blast talking to you again. To have another Long Island man on the show is always a good thing. So I do appreciate it. All right. So for Bulletproof Veteran Podcast, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. Really a pleasure.
Awesome. Take it easy, sir.